Hi folks. The principle that we call Occam's razor basically says choose the simplest explanation. Trim off anything unnecessary. A slightly more accurate and technical definition is where there are two or more competing hypotheses, choose the one that makes the least assumptions. Why? Because it stands a better chance of being the right explanation. Occam's razor doesn't give you any guarantees. It's not dealing with total, complete absolutism on anything. But it has a proven track record of generally leading us in the right direction. So, let's apply Occam's razor to the whole God question. God versus Occam's razor. Can God survive? And in this video, I'm thinking of God in the monotheistic sense, because if you know me from my other videos, I tend to throw the word God around in various different ways. So in this case, I am thinking about it in the sense of deity, in the sense of a divine personality who presides over the universe as creator, as father, or whatever. So, monotheism. Here is what monotheists don't realize about reality. And when I picked this up, I made sure I never forgot it, because it became a key insight for me. And I picked this up, I remember the first time, it was when I was reading Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, and it really leapt out to me as a really profound metaphysical insight. And it's one of the laws of thermodynamics called the law of conservation of energy. And this law appears to be inviolable. At least, anytime we've tested it, it always conforms to what I'm about to describe. The law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It just converts. It changes from one form to another. It never comes from nothing. It never goes to nothing. It simply is. It exists. To try and give you a few examples of this, when you eat something, you take, whether it's an apple, an orange, or an animal, or whatever, you're taking the energy stored in the physical form of that thing, converting it into nutrients that become a part of you. And then the energy that you now have will later get expanded as physical activity. That physical activity will have affected outside of you, so the energy is transferred to that. Even something as straightforward as light involves energy transference, never energy going somewhere and ending its life. That just doesn't happen. For instance, when light strikes a bright surface, it bounces off and continues. When it strikes a dark surface, it stops. But it only stops in the sense that it gets converted into heat. For instance, if I was wearing this dark jumper on a bright summer day, I would be really hot because the light rays would be hitting me and being converted into heat, which I would feel as very uncomfortable. And I could go on and cite numerous other examples. Energy is not created or destroyed. Now, it has what you might call eternal permanence. Now, here's where this matters in the metaphysical sense. This is the very attribute that is supposed to be exclusive to God. God exists outside of time. He never had a beginning. He will never have an end. He is eternal. And yet, energy has exactly the same property. Now, if you're really getting this as a monotheist, that really should be making the hair stand up on the back of your neck, because this is informing you in a very important way about reality. So we have eternal permanence. Now, here's where monotheists make the big mistake when they talk about the Big Bang. And I made this mistake myself in the past because I never took the time to read from a proper science book what the Big Bang actually is. I just assumed there was a kind of a big expanse of nothingness, space, into which something just went from nowhere. And I thought, oh, that's completely absurd. Well, of course it is completely absurd, but that's not what the Big Bang is. The energy that, I hesitate to use the word create. I was going to say the energy that created the universe. But the energy that, shall we say, produced the material universe was not created at the moment of the Big Bang. The energy was a part of the singularity from which the Big Bang came. Now, what is a singularity? A singularity is, I don't want to get this wrong because sometimes I do, infinite density in zero volume. So it's still there. But if you imagine the entire universe compressed to a point smaller than a pinhead, a point so small that it's not really there, that's a singularity. And a black hole is a singularity in the opposite sense. It's where the matter is being sucked back into instead of blown out of. A black hole isn't like a hole in the sense of the matter all goes somewhere. It's a point of extremely intense gravity in the universe that keeps being added to all the time by everything that gets sucked in to it. So it's not that anything ever stops existing or starts existing. The energy simply is. And I think a case could be made for the idea that when one universe collapses, that actually provides the kickstart for a successive universe. And we have universe after universe. Or it could be the case that this universe will end in a heat death. But whether it's one or the other, the conditions are simply returning to the conditions that were in place prior to the universe existing. Therefore, it stands to reason that those conditions would produce a universe again, because the energy is never destroyed. It simply is. Now, what about God? This was supposed to be a video about God. The Christian will say, God made the universe. Well, there is no reason to say that. Why do I need to invent a God who makes the universe when it is testable that the energy of the universe was never made? It simply is. And if you think I'm cheating by saying that, then surely it's the same kind of cheat to say God simply is. God is the thing outside of causality that does not require explanation. But it's actually testable that energy is the thing outside of causality that does not require an origin. Now, I cannot say why this energy exists, but then a Christian cannot say, why does God exist? Why is there a God rather than no God? Why is there energy rather than no energy? We don't know. But at least the energy can be said to be definitely here. What I'm really getting at is, does adding a God into this, does it provide any more explanatory power for the existence of the universe than simply the universe itself, the energy of which is understood to be eternal? No, there is no more explanatory power in that whatsoever. So monotheism is out. Monotheism, according to Occam's razor, is totally unnecessary. I can't really disprove it, but it simply adds nothing of value to the explanation that we do have. So the only reason that there really is left to hold a monotheistic view is if you come to hold that view via religious revelation, such as the Bible. The Bible teaches God is real, therefore I believe God is real. You certainly wouldn't come to the conclusion that God is real if you simply reasoned your way with philosophy and science and the best of the books and things that are available, the best of the knowledge that's available to you in the present day. You wouldn't, at least I don't, come to the conclusion that God is real. It's just not necessary. It's only necessary if you misinterpret what the Big Bang actually is and if you fail to understand the nature of energy. So some Christians favor what I'm describing, by the way, is called pantheism. Pan meaning all, theos meaning God in the Greek. God is all, God is everything, everything is God. So it provides a definition of God that is different from seeing God as a person. Another reason why God is not a person is because there was a universe before there were people. There were planets before there were people. So why would the creative agent of the universe be a person? Surely that's just our own sense of self-importance talking. Why would God have any of the attributes of a creature, including a mind, including a brain? There's no reason for God to be any sort of human-like consciousness. Now, explaining why consciousness exists is an interesting pursuit. And I don't take the traditional atheist route of viewing consciousness as just an emergent property that just happened to occur within cellular life, within biological organisms. I don't believe that life comes from non-life. I conclude that life is a property of the universe. That this thing we call energy is more mysterious than it appears in the average science textbook. I think the potential for life and consciousness had to be a part of that original singularity that gave birth to the universe. But I don't see this life or this intelligence as some kind of godlike personality, because I've got no reason to think of it as anything like me. The only thing that is really necessary is to view it as a kind of primordial awareness, a kind of basic drive for the universe to experience itself. So the universe is conscious, but that consciousness is a very primitive, primordial thing. And if you imagine the Big Bang as a kind of a big explosion where everything goes flying outwards and then it all starts to come together, and if you imagine a kind of, and this is just a theoretical answer really, but I think it's a good one. If you imagine a kind of a field of non-local awareness, a kind of field consciousness that permeates the whole universe. So the universe is always trying to find ways to experience itself in a kind of a subject-object manner. And one of the ways it does that is through biological organisms, such as me and you. And it starts off in a very simple way as cells that are able to divide, replicate, mutate, and eventually through a process of trial and error over billions of years, it's adding little bits onto itself and trying new things and becoming gradually more sophisticated until you eventually have the forms that we possess today, and we feel really sophisticated, but really all of this is just outgrowths of that original primordial awareness, that original drive for the universe to experience itself. You see, when I first rejected the notion of monotheism, and particularly of organized religion, and I went down this road of understanding that everything is one, I still kind of had this notion that I have to reach the oneness, that I'm stuck down here and there's kind of a big me presiding over all this. And I guess you'd kind of call that panentheism, which is a little bit of a halfway house between monotheism and pure pantheism. So you're kind of understanding that everything in the universe is one, that everything in the universe is God, but you're also seeing God as both yourself and as a divine parent who kind of sees everything and knows everything. And then it gradually started to sink in that there's actually no need to invent that idea of a divine parent at all. There's no need to have that. And when you do away with it, it provides a greater clarity to life, because then you understand that there's nothing to get to, that you're it, right here in your body, experiencing the universe in limited terms. You're it, you're the thing, you're God, if you like, but you're not separate from anything. So it's never a case of trying to reach some higher plateau of existence. It's never a case of thinking that when you die, you go back to the oneness. No. The universe was trying to get to being you. And it's done it. And you're possibly going to pass on your genes, and the universe will get to be you as someone else. And it just keeps on going. So the key insight here is that you've arrived, that you're actually living the life that the universe was trying to live. It's not that this existence is some sort of defect. And of course it's limited in the sense that we have 5 sense perception, brain-based thought. But every kind of consciousness that you can imagine is limited, because consciousness by definition requires a relationship of self to other than self. You can't have self-self, because that's a nonsense statement. That's not consciousness. That's, if you hear terms that are being thrown around like pure awareness, that doesn't mean anything. Awareness of what? Awareness of itself? Well, what is itself? It doesn't seem to be anything. The universe has to unfold with the appearance of duality in order for there to be consciousness at all. So stop trying to escape this consciousness, because this consciousness is just an example of the many forms of consciousness, and they're all dualistic. And even if there were some higher plane of existence that you could access through meditation or psychoactive drugs, and even if it was a real tangible place of higher existence inhabited by other beings, wouldn't those beings be having a material existence? Because we tend to think of the spiritual and the material as separate. But what do we really mean by material? All we really mean is it's an experience of sense perception, of self to other than self. So if there are beings on other levels of existence that we can't see, wouldn't they also be having an experience of self to other than self? Wouldn't they be having a material experience? So it would just be another part of dualistic consciousness. There's no such thing as consciousness without duality. How did we go down this avenue? I'm supposed to be talking about Occam's razor and God. But yeah, to pull things back around again, what use does believing in a divine father figure do? Where does that come from? It's really just yesterday's bad idea. When they didn't know anything about energy, they thought, God made me. And it's really not any different from the ancient pagans who looked at something like thunder and lightning and decided the cause of thunder and lightning is the god Thor with his mighty hammer Mjolnir. You know, it's funny that a Christian can look at a polytheist, one who believes in many gods, and think, oh, that's so absurd. How did people believe such nonsense? You know, the gods of Mount Olympus and all this. Monotheism isn't really any different. It makes the same mistake, except it just provides one source for all the phenomena in the universe instead of many sources. But it's just the same idea. It's we don't know what made the universe, so we'll decide it was something like us. It was a personality like us. There's just no reason anymore to believe that. It doesn't provide any more explanatory power. And saying that the energy is forever, eternally pre-existent, and eternally existent into the future, that's exactly the same as saying God is eternally pre-existent. You see, cause and effect is one of these sneaky things. You can say, okay, this happened, so it had a cause, that happened, so it had a cause, and you can keep going back and back and back. But all of those causes never came out of nothing. You know, if I make something out of material, the material existed before I made it. So every example of cause and effect that you can make is actually a recycling process on something that always did exist and always will exist. There's never such thing as something that comes from nothing. Cause and effect is a recycling process. So this idea of a first cause is a little bit of a faulty idea, because that's not what cause and effect is. Cause and effect is recycling. So just bear that in mind. The idea of a first cause, you know, of a thing that exists outside of the chains of cause and effect, a kind of a transcendent personality that isn't bound by space and time, it's just not a necessary idea, because we already have the energy. And it's not necessary to imbue that energy with any more intelligence than a kind of primordial awareness to experience itself. So that to me is the best theory about what's going on with the universe. And I would challenge any monotheist to provide me with an explanation as to why adding a God into this picture improves that. And if it doesn't improve it, why add him?